Well, hello there, how are you all doing? Ever since 1960, maybe before, US and UK governments have been using fictional writers, mainly thrillers, mystery novels, historical fiction and war fiction, sci-fi, to write scenarios for not just the war games, which are used in quite a lot, but it may surprise you to know that a lot of the time it's used for your actual psyops. You see, back in the early days when they were trying to get the narratives together, they were finding that people weren't believing them mostly because the stories, even though were meant to be realistic, weren't actually compelling enough. The characters that they were coming up with to be involved in these scenarios weren't believable. And so, they approached writers to solve that problem for them. Hang on. These scenarios would be many and varied. The weirdest experience you can have is being sat there watching a scenario play out that you've written in real life, I imagine. It'd be a very strange sort of feeling. This is why people get so sucked in to these psyop scenarios. It's the compelling nature of the actual stories themselves. The drama that plays out. Come on, Marley, move. The characters that they get invested in, so on and so forth. You can see story beats within them, yeah. A narrative flow that's pretty unmistakable, really. Yeah. This is kind of the same sort of thinking behind the actual distractions that are within the system. These people are, these organisations, these nations are painted in a way that naturally cause you to either be drawn to their plight or drawn to them in some way, or hate them in others, yeah. And their positions in the hierarchy are placed in such a way that it amplifies that hate or love, yeah, that you have for them. High emotion, that is what they want. That is what they strive for, yeah? That sort of response. Because through high emotion comes a significant drop in cognitive ability, yeah? You become less able to critically think because of the high emotion that's involved. It kind of overrides it, yeah? So you have to keep this in mind whenever you're doing any sort of research, yeah? especially with this kind of stuff, because it's that high emotion that they bank on. Because it not only wipes out your ability to critically think, it's also addictive. Believe it or not, despair, depression, anger, rage, these base low emotions are incredibly intoxicating. The reason being is the end result, the bit that makes you feel better at the end, which is the dopamine hit. Yeah. So they will place these absolutely horrendous things, even though they may be true. Yeah. Maybe true events. They will place them at strategic points to draw you in a certain direction. And then they'll keep upping the ante as you keep getting drawn further and further down a particular line of inquiry that they want you to go down, that leads away from what you're actually looking for, which is the truth. You may even find the truth of something, just not necessarily what you're looking for. It's an old tactic. This is why I always say, whenever you're researching, leave your emotions at the door. Leave them at the door. And if you can feel yourself becoming more angry or more withdrawn in yourself, yeah, more negative, yeah, then draw yourself back, take a couple of days off maybe, do something else and then go back to it with a fresh mind, fresh eyes. And you'll suddenly see that where you were going isn't where you want to go. It's drawing you in, it's compelling. Yeah. This is because, again, the structure is written by fiction writers. Right? It is some of the best. The hierarchy, the way it's set, they want you compelled to go in a certain way, to go look in a certain direction, away from them, primarily. So, who are these distractions? What are these distractions? And more importantly, how can you spot them? Well, that's what we're going to cover in this episode. So, once again, remember, everything that the system is based on is 95% truth, 10% lies. Okay? This will help going forward. And I know I keep repeating myself, but I need you to get that concept into your head, because that's how the system operates. You can see it clearly in what Candace Owens does, what Ian Carroll does, what the government does, what banks do, what think tanks do, what scientists do. There's always an element of untruth within that truth. Yeah? But they'll also use truth in certain ways to form a lie, which I know is confusing, but I've used this example before. Building 6. Yeah, World Trade Center Building 6, which was the customs building. Yeah, not customs, Coast Guard building, sorry. HQ in New York. It was on fire the morning of 9/11, and this was a huge fire, absolutely huge fire. The reason why there's a fireman stood there with an axe in full gear when that plane's going over and hits the first tower is because they've just finished putting out that fire in Building 6. Inside that building was a massive vault about 10 floors down, and before 9/11 it was full of evidence for the NSA, for the CIA, for the FBI, law enforcement, DEA, you name it. Everyone used that vault because none of the other HQs on that plaza had a basement that far down, or even a basement at all, in the case of Building 7. I've done loads of videos on this, right? But the crux of the matter is that was empty afterwards. Yeah. When the FEMA agent actually went in and started assessing all the damage and realised that, hold on, an explosion came from 10 floors down and shot out the roof, which was 9 floors up, above ground, and also 10 floors of sub-basements, and completely wiped out everything. But the whole vault was emptied beforehand, and you could tell because there was no debris from the evidence that was there. What was that evidence? Stuff against the Clintons, stuff against loads of RICO cases, cartel cases, you name it, Bushes, you name it. That completely opens up a different narrative to the whole 9/11 sort of thing, right? Everything the system does, again, 95% truth, 10% lies. In this case, he used truth segmented and spread around different people. Yeah. It was a multifaceted, multi-objective, multi-faction event with 9/11. Stuff like that always is. Yeah? Everyone just seems to pile in at once and will do their damnedest to keep it secret, yeah? And get what they want out of it. So yeah, there were Jews involved. They had their own agenda. There was the system involved, the lower system. They had their own agenda. There was the Clintons and everyone else involved. They had their own agenda. Essentially, everybody who's saying anything about 9/11 is probably right. There was some involvement with them, and they did something on that day. But once you pool everything together, then you start getting a better picture. And it's the fact that no one will pool that information together is the whole reason why they spread it between so many people. And again, these scenarios involve fiction writers. They always do. Which is why you see so many things that are referencing the Twin Towers and something happening to the Twin Towers before the Twin Towers actually got hit. Yeah? Like that Spider-Man episode, that Spider-Man script, I think, that got canned because of what it did with the Twin Towers. The Four Horsemen got completely cancelled because of what they did with the Twin Towers. You name it, they do it. And these fiction writers are, some of them quite famous, some of them aren't. I said it started in the 60s, right? And that was sort of the official history of where it already started, but unofficially it started way before then. H.G. Wells is one example. He told us truth mixed with fiction, yeah? What they were trying to do, what they were trying to achieve, what they were doing. George Orwell is a very famous example. Aldous Huxley is another one. Chris Carter in modern times is another one. Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. All of them had a hand in intelligence in some way, shape or form, and shaping the narrative that we're now following. So how does this apply to the people in the system, to the actual organisations and the organisational structure of the system as a whole? Well, this is where we get into family histories and other things. They will change the complete family history of a certain family that's involved to fit a particular narrative depending on where they are in the hierarchy and what they want them to do. Yeah? The Rothschilds are a prime example. Everyone thinks they're Jewish, not Jewish, they're German, right? Austrian. Yeah? I don't care what you say, right? I've been teaching this for years, yeah? For absolute years. And it's only recently that they started changing it in the wiki pages, right? And they change it in other sources as well. Yeah? They spread this lie for nearly 80 years, 90 years. They've never been Jewish. They've always been German, always been Austrian. I've gone into that history before, right? But in the background now, you should be seeing just a wiki page, right? From in the space of a year, yeah? How many changes they made on the edit logs. You should be seeing there's quite extensive changes there. That's because of the stuff I was pointing out. Now, I'm not saying I'm special or anything like that. It's just that once they realise they've got a bit of a hole in their narrative, you have to change it. Which is what they were doing there. Because of stuff that was happening in the 7 Years' War, right? Which is the Austrian War of Secession, why they moved to the UK in the first place. That is all now changed, all altered. The way they scrubbed stuff for the Paisser family, yeah? Completely scrubbed information that was on the internet quite freely available, and now you can't get anymore because they took it off, they took it down. Can you use Wayback Machine? Well, you can't. The Wayback Machine is CIA controlled. For fuck's sake, people. Yeah? It's CIA and Intel controlled is the Wayback Machine. Same with Wikipedia. Yeah? Both of them are interlinked. Right? And both of them controlled by Intel agencies. It's been like that for years. Absolutely years. Another thing that they'll do is they'll use decoy families, right, which are decoy bloodlines. So they'll have their bloodline, and then they'll have a decoy one that spreads out, that runs concurrent with theirs, right? And this is to basically muddy the waters between the real family, the real bloodline, and the fake bloodline, yeah? And they run concurrent with each other. The Paisser family is a good example, right? There's two Daniel Paissers that landed on the shores of North Carolina, right, during the early 1800s, right? Two Daniel Paissers. One of them was Louis Jr., the other one was the actual bodyguard, Daniel Paisser. And they both spread out from there, right? Because they run concurrently, it's very hard to tell between them both, right? It takes a lot of looking deeper and deeper and deeper, right, into their family histories to actually figure out who they are, where they come from. They also have a habit of not registering births, not registering deaths, anything just to muddy the waters and stop you from actually finding out who they really are, right, and where they actually come from. So that's another way to do things. Anything to do with the financial system is fake. 100%. No ifs, no buts. If they're involved in the financial institutions, right, and that's all they're known for, they're fake. They're a diversion. So people like Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Morgans, Warburgs, yeah, all that jazz. In the background now, you should be seeing the list of Paisser companies, right, that the Paissers own. You should see Chase Bank in there, Standard Oil, Morgan Insurance. Yeah. It's all very sort of, because they own them. Yeah, that was taken from the 80s, by the way, from a Forbes 500 list. Yeah, Forbes top 500 list. It's the only time that the Paissers have ever released a complete list of what they own. And we can only find the first third on the internet now because they wiped that from the record, completely from the record. They've never done it again and never done it before. It was only that one time, and now you can't find out like hardly any of it. So this is how they hide things, yeah? You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful when looking at anything, yeah? If you start looking at a backstory and it seems really sort of exciting and full of fucking all sorts of crap, yeah, it's like, wow, that's intriguing, or ooh, that's a bit sort of, that's a bit tasty, you know what I mean? A bit exciting. Be wary. Not everyone's life is that like action packed. But for some reason, all these guys seem to have that kind of action-packed life. That's when you know it's written by a fiction writer. Like I said, they've been doing this a long time. A long time. They'll create enemies, they'll create villains of the peace, and they will do their damnedest to make you consider them as villains of the peace. They will tug at your emotions, and that's one of their greatest tools, is your emotions. Your anger, your adoration, your despair, everything, and they will use them to their advantage, and they do it constant. So you need to leave your emotions at the door, like I've always said. Never take anything at face value, which most people do. See something that gets them riled up, and they immediately take that as golden. Yeah, because that's the truth. It's got to be the truth. Otherwise, why do we do it? Why do you think? So, once again, 99% truth, 10% lies. Remember? Always remember that. That's how the system works. A certain amount of truth will always be more than the amount of fiction that they put into it. And that fiction is written by fiction writers. Which I've said all the way through this video. I'm going to give you an idea as to why certain things are done by these people, why a great deal of what many of you believe to be true is false. And what that actually means going forward. For centuries, right up until probably the mid-1800s, these people at the apex were extremely prominent. Everyone knew about them, knew about all the wars, knew who they were. Knew the lineage. And then, as things started to progress with them and regress in certain ways, many a war here and there, it became apparent that they needed some way of disguising their power. At the same time, many what they would call communists, what we would still call elites to this day, were gathering vast amounts of wealth. And rather than see them as a threat, as they always have before, they took a different approach and saw them more as an asset. Something that they could push to the fore so they could retreat behind them and disguise their activities behind what they were doing. Like I said, the system is extremely flexible and you can follow your own agendas if you wish, if you're powerful enough. But whenever you are told that you must do something for the system, you must do it, irrespective of how it affects your agenda in play. People like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, Morgans, Astors, Jeff Bezos's, Mark Zuckerberg's this world. They're all heavily controlled. Yes, they can do their own agendas, but as long as it doesn't conflict with what the actual system's agenda is. And this has been the state of play for 200 years now, roughly. They will plant evidence, they will implant evidence to elevate certain peoples to meet their ends, in a way. To make them look good on one side and be the power at the top on the other. And most people have no idea that this is actually going on. Like I said, most of this is written by fiction writers. Let me give you an example, right? Let me show you how and why to use fiction writers, if I can, in a kind of visual way, shall we say, a crude visual way. Hold on. Right, as you can see here, a little piece of paper. Don't ignore the squiggle. That's just me checking whether the pen works. So, first of all, at the top of the pyramid, you've got your Council of Nine, yeah? The three main families. They branch into the rest of the 13, yeah? So, you've got your Pisces at the top, your Aldebrandinis, your Sassoons, right? Within there, you've got your Ruzafiel, Satagrovna, Idrokoskan and Kreutz, Glucksberg, Wallenberg, Orsini, Farnese, Savoy, yeah, in there, in that bit. The Orsinis actually stem up a bit more because, like I said, they are the Pisces Pope, and they tell the other popes what to do a bit further down. Right? Like I said, here you've got your lesser nobility, right, which is all the rest of the papal bloodlines, and your thingy bloodlines, your Merovingian bloodlines, and then below them you've got your Committee of 300, yeah, and then below them was your popes with the Orsinis at the top, right. Branching out from there is all your DIC, yeah, your Deception Industrial Complex. Below them is all your what you would call your bankers, yeah, that feed into the secret societies here, that also feed into more, like these are more your think tank secret societies, like your CFR on this side, which are like secular, yeah, and then the more mystical on this side, and they have between them the Bohemian Grove, Borgrove, right, and then all your Rand and everything else comes from in there, all your Brotherhood of the Snake, Brotherhood of the Dragon and everything else, and then below them there's your Freemasons, and then everything else, right? All of these tie into each other in some way, shape or form, so you get to about this level, yeah, and then the only tie really is your Orsini, right? But they tie into that, they tie into that, they tie into that. Now, when you get to the secret society levels down here, right? Excuse me again, right? When you get to your secret society levels down here, everything becomes like this. Yeah? You get what I mean? It's all branching off all over the place, yeah? And I know that looks ridiculous, right? But that's essentially what it's like. Yeah? It's just narrow, twisting roads in and out of each other all over the place. All branching into each other. Which becomes confusing, and that's deliberate. Right? They do that on purpose. They want you confused. They don't want you knowing what they're up to, basically. Who they are. They'll give you little glimpses here and there, like with the Pisces. But they'll also shadow themselves with an alternate, a decoy branch of the family. Yeah, that's how they hide themselves behind that. Yeah, that muddies the waters even further. So you're not entirely aware of where they're going a lot of the time. It takes a lot of work actually figuring it out. So to keep people engaged in that confusing atmosphere and that confusing sphere, right, is critical. Because the vast majority of people will get embedded inside that. And to do that, you need compelling storylines. You need compelling information. You get what I mean? And this is why they employ fiction writers like H.G. Wells and George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, yeah? To feed you a narrative and keep you going along that branch, come hell or high water, yeah? To find who you believe is going to be at the top and isn't actually at the top, is someone else, yeah? But they have to compel you into doing that first. They have to keep you engaged. This again ties into the psychology kind of side of things, where they feed your emotions. Yeah, low emotion is very addictive. Not because of the emotion itself, but the reward after when you come out of that emotional state, that dopamine hit. And the more emotional you get, the higher that dopamine hit will be at the end. Yeah, the relief state, so to speak. And that's what they want to keep you in, that relief state of high emotion relief, because that disengages your critical mind. And that's what they're doing. This is also why they use fiction writers, right? Because they know how to weave those narratives, how to keep you engaged, how to keep you emotionally invested, and give you the highs and lows in a way that will keep you going and will keep you engaged. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the whole system in and of itself. Whenever you're researching this field, if you can't understand this foundation, yeah, this foundational point of it, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean that, I truly mean that. You're not going to get anywhere. You can't. Because you're always going to be triggered, you're always going to be compelled to go down certain paths because your emotionality is taking you that way. Yeah. That causes problems, obviously, because then you get false leads, you get false information, and the false leads are so good that they may even be true a lot of the time. Yeah. Which is another thing. Like I said, they use truth skillfully in such a way, that it will actually just feed the narrative even more. Yeah. And they've had a lot of years to actually perfect this sort of craft. So you have to be really aware of that. Figuring out how to get through all this minefield is a task in and of itself. It really is. Learning how to do it. There are certain things you can do. I think I've given a few in one of the other bits of this video. But you need to you need to get a grip on narrative beats and how narrative beats are woven and written and spun. Yeah. Read Edward Bernays. Yeah, Edward Bernays is fantastic for actually getting a handle on a lot of this. Even Goebbels. Yeah, Goebbels' writings on propaganda are also spectacular and very, very good. Both of them go into the psychology of it in great detail. In fact, they're probably a must, probably integral to your research. If you haven't read those yet, then you need to. It's as simple as that. YouTube channels to watch. David Whitehead and Michael Tsarion, they do an Unslaved Podcast. Their in-depth analysis of the psychology of the female Illuminati and just the Illuminati in general, yeah, is just second to none. It's easily your best resource, one of your best resources. Avoid people like Icke, David Icke, anyone spinning the Israel narrative. I know I keep banging on about this, but anyone spinning that Israel narrative, right, is leading you down the garden path. It's that simple. They may not even be aware that they're doing it, a lot of them, right, but they are. They are the scapegoat that is going to take the fall when everything goes to shit, which it is doing, and they are doing. Why? Everyone keeps going on about, well, you can't criticise the Jews, you can't criticise the Jews, and yet all you see nowadays is just that. Online, yeah? And on your telly. The fact that it's on mainstream media should give you a kick up the arse to make you think, hang on a minute, something wrong here. Again, it's feeding you that narrative, dragging you down that garden path, yeah? Kick whoever's dragging you down that in the nuts and take yourself back a few steps. Take yourself out completely, give your head a wobble a bit, and then go back in. The system is crafty, very crafty. And like I said, deliberately confusing and deliberately spun to be that way. Anyway, that's all I've got to say.